He was an assistant coach of the national championship University of Kentucky basketball team under the legendary coach Rick Pitino. He's now coached for 24 years at Division III Greenville University with a basketball team with a distinction of having the highest season scoring average of any basketball team of all time. And he is also now mayor of Greenville, Illinois. My guest is George Barber, and he is a person worth admiring. Hi, everyone. My name is Doug Newton, and I'm the host of At the Intersection with Doug Newton. This is the place where scripture, culture, and character meet. And this is our new feature series called People Worth Admiring. Now, my weekly podcast, At the Intersection, is all about showing you how to develop your character to engage our culture with grace and fresh impact in your corner of the world. And I know no greater way to develop good character than the power of admiration. But who should you admire? See, that's the question. So in this special series, I present you with some great options, people whose stories and comments will inspire you and shape your character because they are people worth admiring. Well, again, welcome. It's guest month here in August 2023, and I can't wait for you to meet George Barber. So, what do you say we get right to it? George, thanks so much for being with us here today. I put this word out to about 12, 15, whatever number of people to join me on this guest month, and I was thrilled when I think you were the first to respond, and you definitely are right there and the first that I want to have the people be able to connect with. You are a person that I admire, and the reason I'm doing this podcast and using people like you is because I believe that admiration is probably the strongest kind of power that draws us toward changing, being different kind of people, or just growing and developing. And so anyways, I'm going to get into that in just a little bit, talk a little bit more specifically about that. But anyways, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's an honor and privilege to be here with you, Doug. So I've enjoyed the podcast and listened to it, watched it. And I don't think I've missed any. And in fact, I listened to some twice. So, yeah, it's been very helpful, and I look forward to Wednesdays. I don't catch it live because you shoot it at noon, and I'm still, working.
You got a life.
I got a life. But I always look forward to my Wednesday evening, walk with the dog or exercise session or quiet, moment finally to listen and watch. And so it's been very helpful. And thank you for doing this. And I will never forget when you told me you were going to do this. I was excited, and I didn't really understand what it was about. But I obviously, as a coach and working with young people, I'm really happy that you've chosen to sort of lean into character traits and just much needed, and liked how you rolled it out, being not necessarily what the scripture, the Holy Spirit gives us, but something that we can actually develop. So I love that. Love the theme. And it's an honor to be here.
Well, as long as you brought up the coaching thing, that's a good place for us to get started and just kind of go backtrack a little bit in your life. Yes, you are a coach, and we'll get on to some other things as well, but take us back to kind of the beginning of your career. I know that your early days of coaching had some very interesting features to it.
Right. So, well, you might be referring to my opportunity to coach at the University of Kentucky, which was the winningest all-time basketball program until Kansas passed us. But we were behind North Carolina at one point, and then we found out North Carolina vacated some wins, and we were able to, leapfrog over them. So I'm not sure. We're right up there at the top. But but when I was there, first of all, I wanted to coach because when I was a kid, I always thought the moniker being coach, was really the highest um, calling that a person could have, to be
Hmm.
called a coach.
Hmm.
And so even since I was a little kid, I felt like, I wanted to coach. And the Lord blessed me. I remember being on my knees at Asbury University as a physical education major, and I was in the dorm room, and I said, Lord, I will do whatever you want me to do. I'll go into missions, I'll go into the pastorate, I'll go into ministry, whatever you want me to do. But I really want to teach and coach.
Hmm.
And I will never forget being on the bus coming back into Lexington after winning the national championship in New York City. We beat Syracuse um, in New York, flying home, and it was almost surreal, being a part of the team and being on the team bus. And when Coach Pitino said, "Hey, what you've done, you've accomplished something no one can take away," and I thought, "Man, Lord, you have really blessed me." I was a, small Division III athlete, not any very good at all. In fact, I would say I was in a 30-30 club, meaning if we were 30 up or 30 down, I would maybe get in the game.
Hmm.
And to be a part of a national championship team, and of the winningest program in college basketball history, it was quite a blessing. And I remembered that prayer at that point. I thought, Lord, wow, you have really blessed me to honor you with saying, I want to do whatever you want me to do, but I'd like to coach. And now this, so
Hmm.
that was a special start.
So you were kind of relating to the Lord, like, Coach, hey, put me in the game. Put me in the game. I'd like to play this
Yeah.
position, but
I think so. I think so. And I really meant it. I'll do anything, but I really felt called and wanted to coach really badly. And of course, when you win a national championship, that really helps your resume. I mean,
yeah,
you're
yeah.
good to go, at least initially to find jobs. So
S- So
it's
what
great.
was? We're going to get on with some other things that you have currently done or done since then, and then currently. But if you could identify one or two things in that program under Coach Pitino and in that high power kind of environment that you learned
Right.
from a character standpoint, what would it be?
So people would ask me all the time, what is it about Coach Pitino? How can he take over programs and immediately either turn them around or take them to a perennial powerhouse national champion? And I think what they're looking for is, when they ask that question, is some sort of offensive or defensive scheme,
Mm.
which everyone wants to know that, but it's not that at all. It was simply a couple things, two things I believe that really. First of all, he believed in you, so
Hmm.
he got you to believe you could do more than even you thought you were able to do. And so that belief is very powerful. Everybody wants somebody to believe in them, and he did that, and he made you believe I can do this. The other thing is that he did so well at that level was he held everyone accountable, but he empowered you to do your job. So, for example, if you went to someone, maybe in a prior job or a post job after the Kentucky years, you may say, "Here's a problem," and they say, "Well, okay, I'll take care of it," or whatever. And you thought, "Man, if you could just empower me to do the job," and that's what Coach Pitino did so well, which it taught me. I wish I could delegate, hold people accountable, and empower them like he did with me. But he would say, you would say, "Here's an issue," and he'd say, "That's your job."
Hmm.
And you would go, "Wow, okay, I got to go back and I got to get this done." And he said, "If you need backup, I'm here, but I expect you to get it done." And so that empowerment, along with accountability and the belief in you, were two things that, and I don't really know that has to do with character, but it certainly draws out your best because you know you're being depended on,
Hmm.
to get a job done.
Yeah, I like the fact that you took us in that direction just for a moment because part of the purpose of the work that I do in character is asking the question. So how does character develop? And it seems to me very clear as we look at history, and then just from what you said, that when people are thrown into situations where they're being depended on. I can't
Right.
drop the ball, and literally in sports, I can't drop the ball. That goes a long ways in terms of answering the question. So, how do you draw the best out of people? How do you
Yeah.
help develop
There's
their
a
character?
I like reading history and context, and in John Adams' book, well, one of my favorite writers is David McCullough.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Lisa, if he ever, that's my wife,
Yeah.
if he ever comes to near St. Louis, I want to hear him speak. And one of the questions an audience asked him after the speech was, if you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive in history, who would you have dinner with? And he thought, so I thought, okay, this would be good. He's really thinking about this, and he said Abigail Adams, and
Hmm.
I thought, oh, great choice. And one of the things she did with her children was, and she wrote letters, and they were very, almost poetic. But she said, no one wants an easy life. Take the difficult road. Go overseas, my 12-year-old son, with your father to Paris as an ambassador, and then you won't know the Pacific quarter in life because you'll be challenged to do things. And that particular son went on to be also a United States president. I wish I could read the quote, but the idea was do hard things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, before we go any farther, I want to show the audience that are watching and the ones that are listening why I asked you on. I like to do this. I mean, this is only my second one of these podcasts, but every one of the podcasts, I want to go through a list of traits and answer the question. So why did I pick Ugo? Why did I pick George? And really, I could go down through this list of these are the 12 traits that I tend to focus on. There's a ton of them, and a lot of them are very similar. They kind of overlap, but these are the 12 that I've identified as target traits that I think have some unique elements to it that make it so that they're worth kind of singling out. And so, and there's ways in which people of character represent all of these at one time or another. But here's the reason why you. I see you as a person of courage because, as I happen to know, that some of the things that you've chosen to do, and even how you coach, and the things that the philosophy of your team, and it has to be unique, and it takes courage for that to happen. And again, I could go down through each one of these. I just want to single out some special ones. I think you are a tremendously honest person, in the best sense of the word, not just in terms of what you say always being the truth. Of course, that's the case of what honesty means, but honesty in terms of kind of what you see is what you get. It's like what Jesus said of Nathanael before he had ever met Nathanael. He had some kind of a vision of Nathanael, one of the disciples, before he was actually brought into the fold. And he said, I saw you sitting on the tree, and you are a person in whom there is no guile, nothing fake or unreal. And so I thought that was for me, that's kind of honesty. I see you as a person who is persevering. Of course, in your role as coach for so many years at Greenville University, obviously there's going to be tons and tons of reasons why perseverance is required. You have up and down years, you have new administrations coming in, and all sorts of things like that. I don't want to belabor this point, but finally, I do want to land on vigor. I have each one of these traits I have a definition for, and vigor for me, I say, is putting your whole self into every task. That is George Barber. You go to the dictionary, you look up the word vigor, and there's a little pencil drawing of George Barber right next to it. So, anyways, that's why I've had you here today, and among other things. But now that I've totally embarrassed you, deal with it.
Yes, thank you. Could I comment on that real quick?
Yeah.
So I've done your course, and I've been evaluated by my peers because that's part of the course is to go out and get 3 people to evaluate you. And I should have brought my little notebook where I wrote down, what I was high and low in. And thank you for identifying that. And I don't know what you just did with me was a put up, right? So we do these in our locker room where we say something affirming about another teammate. And so you and I are teammates in this case. Right. And you've said something affirming. I don't know if you saw my body language, and I don't know how I appeared on camera, but I probably began to set up and smile a little bit more as you were affirming me. Yeah. And it's such a powerful concept. So we do that, whether we win or lose, we do these put-ups at the end of the game. And players, we call it window room, mirror room. They get in the window room and out of the mirror room, especially if you lost the game. But not only did you give me a great put up and thank you, but because I've done your course, I think those 3 were the highest 3.
Really?
I know, yes, I know courage and vigor were like off the charts, as my peers
good to
said.
know.
And then right, and then diligence, which I've done the book here. You can see it's a little frayed. I mean, I was low on this, and even 30 seconds before the podcast, I was like, man, I don't know if I can get this thing working, because that's diligence and it's preparation. But you say single out if you want to, any 3, but maybe you want to get 3 that you'd like to work on. And another funny story, I was doing something that got Lisa upset, and she said, I don't know which 3 you're picking to improve on. She said, but you could do humility. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know what I did, but I was like, and she said it with a lot of, energy. So I thought, man, I better do humility. So that's another one that I've done. But thank you for affirming me in those areas, and that coincided with what your study drew out among my peers. And even in the diligence one, you gave me a little bit of a pass because you said, sometimes these things you're not super great at them, but they don't drive people that crazy. Yeah. And so thankfully everyone said, yeah, George, sometimes you fly by the seat of your pants, but we kind of get it. So if you could improve on that a little bit, we would all appreciate it.
Yeah.
So anyways, it's been helpful.
Maybe I ought to step in just for a second, because a lot of the listeners or the viewers of this are maybe not even aware, because even in my podcast, I'm not going public in on the screen or anything talking about those courses that I have. But George is talking about courses on character development that I've developed with some assessments and kind of a do-it-yourself exercises. That's what he's referring to. I did not know that you were going to talk about that today. I appreciate it. Sure. And you have given me feedback over the last couple of years that you have been using that, and I've really appreciated the fact that you have. But we'll move on and talk about you again. So let's finish up this kind of segment where we're just seeing what else is kind of part of your career track and accomplishment track. Take us on through, so that you after UK you wound up getting your doctorate.
Yes, I got a doctoral degree, and Coach Pitino brought me in the office the day I got it, and he said, George, 2 things. Number one, I'm going to throw an investigation into how in the world you were able to get this doctoral degree, because you can't spell very well. All the recruiting letters that go out, I have to check them, and you have errors. So that was kind of funny. But he said, George, I think you should probably go back to Division III. And I was kind of hanging, like, why would you say that? Does that mean I can't coach at Division I? I'm not capable? And he said, here's why. He made no commentary other than this. He said, you should probably go back to kind of where you came from, because you care about people. And I thought, wow, that was okay. That's a great reason. And so I did go to Division I for a couple years at Bradley University. I was an assistant coach, but I wasn't able to use my doctoral degree and teach. And a perfect scenario came up where I could come to Greenville and teach and coach. And when you have a doctoral degree, the powers, the academic eggheads that are up at the top, they go, "You're in. Like, we're glad you can coach and you can teach. You got a doctoral degree." So
Should I bleep that egghead word?
oh no, it's
Should I
okay.
bleep that?
I mean, right, it's in my heart, so it's okay. I really,
Okay.
uh, uh, but no, bless her heart. We do live in two worlds, and education and athletics is really an unnatural union, but that's for a whole nother conversation. But we're doing the best we can in the United States. The point being, I've gotten to use my doctoral degree here, and it's been, a real blessing. I've been here for 24 years, starting my 25th year. Roy Mulholland and I came in together in 1999, and so I've been blessed. You just don't see that in coaching. If you're at a place for this long, you can have influence. You can have influence in the community. You can have influence over the course of a lifetime with your players, with people that are in the coaching community. You build those friendships. So it's been a real blessing. And when I say to people, I've been here for 24 years, my coaching peers go, "Wow, that's just very unusual." And how are you able to do that? And I'm blessed. We don't put the priority on winning, although we obviously want to do well. That's not a reason to be let go. Thankfully, at Greenville, because we've had some really good years and then some lean years. But I've been here for 24 years, and partially Lisa said, "Listen, when the kids start high school, we're not leaving." So we've gotten them all through. And last Tuesday night was the first night in 20 some years we were empty nesters.
And you've had, count them, 5 kids.
Five children, yeah, 5.
Yeah.
So they finally all graduated. They all have jobs, and I think they're all making more than me already. So that's how it goes, right?
Well, hey, because our viewers and listeners wouldn't know, sometimes when people hear you've been here 24 years, they think, well, he didn't have anywhere else he could have gone, kind of that, it's like the end of the road for you. But that hasn't been the case, has it? And you've got some connections with Division I NCAA still.
Right. Oh yeah. In fact, last week I coached at the NCAA. They're trying to clean up college recruiting. They're making a great effort. And so they brought us all in, paid for us a little stipend, brought in 800 athletes and about 100 Division II and III coaches and some high school coaches. And I got there and I said, "Man, we're in a brand new facility in Memphis." And they said, "Yeah, our budget for this is $50 million. And I said, "Oh, that's where the money is. Like, I found it." Like, it's such a blessing. And so I go and I hear these great stories and I rekindle friendships with guys in Division I and even some guys in the NBA. And they'll say to me, "George, you had those 5 children, this is a cesspool. Don't leave where you're at. Like, it was the best years of our lives and the best years of your life." So, but I'm blessed to have those friends in high places. And it is helpful occasionally to work at an event where the budget's $50 million.
Yeah.
And you feel like, okay, there are some people thriving, and I feel more called. It's odd, but I feel more called to do what we're doing at Greenville, which is more street level, frontline. Sometimes first generation college students, after having worked at those places, but it is nice to rekindle those friendships. Yeah.
And I don't have the facts right, but I know that you've spoken a couple times at banquets during the Final Four. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm super blessed to do that. So first of all, I don't know if the viewers know, but we run a really odd style of basketball where the last 8 years we've been the highest scoring team in the nation. And a couple of years ago, we were the highest scoring team of all time at 135 points a game average. So we had a 200-point game, several games in the 150s, 160s. In fact, I believe you saw a game, it was 137, 131. We lost. The next day, we lost in overtime, 161 to 160. So can you imagine coming to a basketball game with that kind of firepower going on? It's a lot of fun. But because of the unique style and also a mentor of mine, Frosty Westering who called "Make the Big Time Where You Are." That's what we try to do here at Greenville. Is we adopt that philosophy and make the big time here. It's your heart, state of your heart, not a place. And so it's so unique. People recognize it and they say, "Would you like to speak?" Even though you're at tiny Greenville, about your philosophy, both basketball and your, off the court philosophy. And one time, Doug, I was astounded. I was in between like Bill Self, who's at Kansas, national championship coach, and then Larry Brown, who's like a perennial coach in the NBA and in different places, and he's been at Kansas. And they sandwiched me right in between those two people, and I thought, wow, I cannot believe I'm in this group of company, of coaches. But because I guess again the Lord has blessed our unique basketball philosophy, high scoring. For some reason, people are fascinated with high scoring, and also I get a chance to talk about the big time and making, taking winning sort of out of the picture, trying to keep that from being an idol. And when I talk like that, a lot of my D1 coaches will go out and get coffee or something after, and they'll say, "George, that is just so wonderful. I don't know if we could do it in Division One, but great to hear about it." So I get to share it, and yes, at the national convention. So yeah.
Well, now you've gone and done it, though. You're
Okay.
still a coach, still a teacher,
Yeah.
but a few years ago you had this dream of entering politics.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So could possibly have been a mistake, but since I was 11 years old and I walked in my uncle's office and I was selling candy bars for our school, and I said, "Uncle Pate, I'm selling candy bars as a fundraiser. How many do you want?" And he sat back and he laughed, and I said, "What are you laughing at?" He said, "George, you could be governor." He goes, "You didn't ask me if I wanted any. You asked me how many I wanted." And I thought, okay, so it got in my mind. I enjoyed studying politics and helping in campaigns. And several years ago, I did run for state senate, did not win. You have to have a lot of money. But I guess from that was birthed the idea maybe you could help locally, more locally as a mayor. And so I sort of did my diligence and tried to find out if that was the case, and it seemed to be. So I ran and won, and I've been mayor of Greenville for the last 2.5 years.
Town of about 7,000.
7,000,
yeah.
yes, yeah. So we have a federal prison and we have a university, and so it swells a little bit during those times of the years. But anyways, yeah.
But it is kind of on an upswing in terms
Thank
of.
you. I like your positivity. But I hope so. Everybody's digging out of the pandemic, and there's still everybody runs at you wagging their finger after church. Fix the pothole on my road, and I get all that. But people say, "What do you like about being mayor?" And the answer is, it's not to run at me and tell me about the pothole in the road, but you can get stuff done more at a local level than at a state level. However, what I like is we're developing a downtown Plaza Park, and we're hoping to add some of these character traits as a theme in the park. But even bigger than that, we have a tie to the Underground Railroad in Greenville. There's still houses standing that were part of that. There's a history here. And we want to memorialize that in our Plaza Park. So to me, like, to be able to have maybe hopefully some influence on that and highlight that, because that oozes of character, right? Like those people that help with that cause are character people helping others find freedom.
Yeah.
And we want to recount that and champion that. So that part about having influence is exciting. And that's probably my favorite part about being, in a position of leadership or servant leadership in our community.
So what, now starting to pull it down a little bit more focused then toward toward character, and thinking of the people who are tuning into this right now, I love to find out from people who are in the thick of things in the world. Of course, I'm a believer in Christian faith and in the importance of churches and so forth. But having people out in the thick of the world and everything, and how character is needed there. Take your life now, where you are and what you've seen. What do you think is, most important? Like right now in this day and age, what do we need? What particular character, maybe particular traits, are the ones that you think this is more important than anything else?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm going to answer that in an odd way.
Okay.
In this regard, I learned a really valuable lesson when I was working for Coach Pitino, and so this is a full disclosure deal. I mean, Coach was like, I was kind of in the movie Goodfellas. I mean, he was an Italian, fiery, got stuff done, and thankfully, he did have character. He was a man of character, and because it is so needed, people. I'll just say this in the culture: they will migrate. They will, like a moth to light, anything that has character. But what I was going to say is to be yourself. So I had a player I had to discipline, probably wasn't going to class or something. This is at Kentucky. And in the discipline process, I threw in a couple of swear words because I thought, well, it really works for Coach Pitino. And this player looked at me and he said, Coach Barber, you don't swear. And I immediately lost impact. And so I said, you're right. That didn't work too well. So it was good. He called me out on it. But my point I'm trying to make with that is, man, when people display character, and so mine, you said courage, honesty, and vigor, and thank you so much for that put up. When I display those things that sort of naturally come to me, and maybe I've been taught or maybe I've developed, but I'm also, I have sort of a natural tendency, maybe a risk-taking tendency that gives me the courage piece, right? Mm-hmm. So when we take our strengths and we just act in our strengths of the character that we have developed, I just think the world is just going, will see it and appreciate it. They'll test it, but I think they will migrate to that, and it will give you a chance to have an opportunity to sort of have a witness with them. So that would be my answer is to do those things that are right here, like, just naturally come to you, but that you're also trying to develop. And I believe people will see that and appreciate it and ask you maybe, how did you have courage to make that decision? And you'll have a chance to share with them, how you arrived at that. And maybe I've already died to myself on this issue. I know I could get fired, if my style of play doesn't win games or something, but I'm already over that. And so therefore I have the courage to embrace it anyways. And so you have a chance to share about it. That's my answer.
Well, it's interesting that this whole conversation has taken a little bit. I mean, the whole podcast has taken a little bit different turn than I was anticipating, because it really has landed where, what takeaways are we going to have from this? More of the takeaways are not about a particular trait and its particular importance, but what keeps on coming out here, and I guess it makes sense because you're a coach, is I'm getting more takeaways about how you help people live into their character and want to develop the character, which is really, that's what coaching is, right? You're just looking at the potential in a human being. You're seeing what strengths they come with or could develop, and you're just drawing that out of them. So, you've already talking about Coach Pitino with, putting you into situations that are maybe demanding, and you rise to the occasion. We've already talked about, but I mean, you've talked about the value of affirmation and encouragement and the put-ups, and now here you are basically saying, the thing I would tell people is find that element that you are already relatively strong in and maximize that.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
So
right,
I mean,
right.
it's like,
Yeah.
hey, thank you. This is a different direction than what I was anticipating, but it really is going to help. I mean, stop and think about it. If parents were listening to this right now, they'd have 3 really significant takeaways about how to help their kids develop in character. Put them into situations that are going to be tough, and a lot depends on them doing it and doing it well. Give lots of honest affirmation, not just, constantly, putting them up on a refrigerator, every little thing that they did, but the helpful kind of affirmation, even in the midst of losses or whatever. And then this last one, be identifying and encourage a person. Just be who you are in this, and it's going to get better. It's going to get stronger, and the other things will tend to follow along, and you'll have influence. So every parent needs to hear that in terms of raising kids. You've done it with 5. Good for you.
We've been so blessed to get the 5 through. I mean, we celebrated the other night. I could not believe it. And I told Lisa, this is nice. Like, I don't mind the house being empty. Now, maybe, eventually they'll be back. Hopefully they will. And but yes, it's been amazing to be able to raise 5 children in today's culture. And it's a tsunami, like parents and those that are trying to live out their character. The culture is a tsunami in ways not to do things, right? And so I'm fighting the ESPN culture as a coach always, because they highlight the spectacular usually, and we have to sort of re-educate our players. But
tell me just a little bit more about that. Re-educate them. That's interesting.
Right. So they're in the culture. We call it red car, blue car. And everybody's driving a red car. Everybody has to be number one or no one in the sports culture. I'm talking specifically in the sport culture. But what we try to emphasize is we want you to be a blue car, which is maybe not as sporty as the red car, but it's me versus me. And give it my best shot. Like how can we how can I celebrate that athlete that comes to practice that maybe is not the most, the strongest, biggest, fastest, but gives it 100%. And it's the biblical principle of the widow's mite. Like, everybody else is going to notice the guy who scores 20 points a game, and he's already going to get his accolades. But the guy who comes in or the parable of the talent, either one, that gives, he has 2 talents and he gives 2. Man, we're going to celebrate like crazy because he had 2 and he gave 2.
Yeah.
And so, the only wrong response would be the fear, right? And not do anything, and to be afraid to use what you have. So I think that's the culture that the red car is the number one or no one, and we would like to replace that with me versus me. Give it your best shot. That's the idea of re-educating against the culture who's always going to say you have to win. And that's why I really kind of like to invite people into our locker room more when we lose, because in some ways it's more powerful when they see the guys giving put-ups after a loss.
Excuse me, just sneezed on air.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great. So sometimes it's more powerful, and our guys don't get it at first because the whole culture says, no, you got to win. Coach is going to yell at us. Now we're going to have to run tomorrow. And we say, no, we are going to run tomorrow, but we are going to celebrate playing. And, there's a line in an Alison Krauss song that I've always liked, and people don't understand it, but it says the next best thing to playing and winning is playing and losing. And that's kind of interesting, like, because you're still playing, and you're still getting out there and giving it your best shots. Teddy Roosevelt quote about man in the arena, being bloodied but giving it his best shot. So that's the ESPN tsunami of culture of sport. But it's like that in almost every area of life, being the the biggest, strongest, fastest, prettiest, whatever, most money. And we're saying, no, that's, man, come to Greenville or come to wherever you're at, make that the big time, and let's talk about having all those things. You can still be pretty empty, and how do we fill that void? And of course, part of the void is a spiritual void. But the culture just can leave a person really high and dry. That's what I was referring to.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is good. I would like to end actually differently than I thought I was going to, because we're already picking up. My last question I always like to drive to is, what would you say to a younger person coming into a career or a marriage? What advice would you give, character advice? But you're already sprinkling those kind of comments all the way through here. So how about this? You've talked about Rick Pitino and other influences. You're reading Abigail Adams. You talked about Teddy Roosevelt. Leave us with one other person or experience that you think had a lot to do with shaping your character that maybe you haven't mentioned.
So as I think through that, I look right across the locker room to one of these signs that's right behind me. And it says, just when you think you is, that's when you ain't. And it's an interesting thing. And the person who used to say that to me all the time was my dad. So he learned it from an old farmhand in North Carolina, but it has listed as a person who gave the quote as Max Barber. I don't want to get emotional here, but of course it's my dad. And he passed away. I don't know. It's been about 15 years, a little more now. But I remember you kind of counseling me through that, and you praying a blessing over me as if it were my dad praying a blessing over me. It's very meaningful. So I would say my dad, and he was the original coach. He was the original tighten the belt. I'm sorry, it's hot. I'm sorry your tooth got knocked out. We have to keep going. And so that perseverance, even with not being able to spell, allowed me to, get some things done in my life. And I remember we went through a really difficult patch with the city just recently, and my city manager said, "Are you going to quit?" And I said, "No, I'm not going to quit like that. That's just not in my vocabulary." And so she was like, "Oh, good." So anyways, I would say my dad and that perseverance piece was the biggest thing that he taught me. And one of my best friends came to his funeral, and he said this. I mean, there's a great quote from a Matthew Broderick movie called Glory, where he says, "If this man should fall, who's going to bear the standard?" And he's pointing to the guy who's carrying the flag. And I said at my dad's funeral, I want to bear the standard. I want to carry the flag for him. And just the piece of persevering through difficult times and I don't know, I've said it several times, but giving it your best shot is probably what I've learned from him the most. And I'm so appreciative of that today.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I think anybody who's listening to this, and I hope when people listen to this, we just want it to be something that's just drawing people toward a life of character. And is there anything more important than for us to be looking for that standard to bear that has been passed on to us, and we want to be passing that on to others? You are doing that in many dimensions in your life. I'd like to pray a prayer of blessing over you, and then we'll be through here.
Thank you,
Lord Jesus, I do thank you so much for George. Yes, I happen to know him as a friend, But the best people to admire, I think, Lord, are friends. And I thank you that you've put people in my life like George. I just pray that you'll be with him as he continues to shoulder really important roles and responsibilities that affect the lives of young people and citizens of a small town in Illinois, but even beyond that, through every opportunity that he has to be himself, doing what he does, saying what he believes, that you will always bless that and reward that effort by fruitfulness, people who rise up themselves and become better people, people who we hope would actually come to know and have faith in you, but people who also come to that place where they just choose to help the world be a better place by becoming better people. So I thank you for George so much, and I pray this blessing on him in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well,
Thank
thanks,
you.
George. I'm going to sign us off here and
Yeah.
look forward to the next time we get to see each other.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much. Bye-bye.
Oh, wow. Wasn't it great to meet George? George Barber, Coach George Barber, Mayor George Barber. I mean, great takeaways, especially when it comes to helping or coaching others toward character. So if you appreciated this interview, why not subscribe to this channel? It'll tell YouTube that there are people out there who are interested in this kind of podcast. And also drop a comment below just to say thanks to George for giving his time to us today. Well, I hope you'll tune in next week to meet another fascinating guest. I guarantee it will be interesting. I can't wait. But until then, why don't you keep looking around for people worth admiring?